Suffering in silence might seem very easy, but in all actuality, it's making you suffer more. So are you the one out there who keeps when you're actually suffering from something, whether physical, mental, or you feel like you have to do things on your own? Are you that business owner who says, I grew up, being the tough one out there. There was no complaining. The thing needs to go on. Business needs to go on. So there is no time for speaking out. And I don't have time to convince anyone else. I just want someone who listens to me. Or don't you even go there? So if you are the one who says suffering in silence is better than speaking out, then this story is for you. Especially if you are that one business owner out there, and you're not alone, by the way, who really believes that there's no time and it's not allowed, especially when you're a guy, to say, this is not going the way it should. Well, I'll tell you something. I've been raised that same way. And no, I'm not a guy, as you may have seen. But, having grown up, and we didn't have a lot of money. But besides that, there was always something going on with me physically. And back in the days, they didn't know why. And they also didn't try and find out. I got a GP, a family doctor, who thought that everything was psychological. So I was raised basically not complaining about anything. So I could say it hurts, and mom could take me to the hospital, but still it would be to no avail, because they didn't know why it was caused, and they thought that I'd sprained something, and to a degree they were right, but they didn't know why. Of course, nowadays I know, but back then I didn't. And when I would be taking a look at my dad, the big guy, he was 6'6", he didn't complain. He, just recently I was talking to Zen, and we were talking about men and if they were allowed to cry back in the day, or even now. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, no, I never saw my dad cry. And, right until the end, there he was, and he was even comforting me on his deathbed. So, but here's the thing. If we don't speak out, things might happen that we have no control over. And so back in 93, I was in my 20s. I worked for a company, and I was one of those people who got stuck with repetitive strain injury, RSI, pretty early. So if correct, in the Netherlands it was unknown. Back in 1993, in the US it was already a little bit known. So they knew repetitive strain injury, so because of the keys on the keyboard, this was why people suffered from RSI, we say RSI. But as to what to do, how to fix it, that wasn't known. But here was the thing. Since I got it at work, and no one helped me, and the doctors who were related to work didn't believe me either, nothing much was done. So at first, of course, I could stay home, and I wanted to share it with other people, but there was no one to talk to, because basically all my contacts were at work. So I had a boyfriend. We just had moved to a different city, and my family lived elsewhere. So it was like an hour driving, and back in that day, I didn't have a car for private use. We used his car, my boyfriend's car, for private use, but not my car. So when I got stuck at home, that's literally where I was. I was stuck at home. So there I was, and I couldn't do much of anything. I mean, I couldn't open a bottle of juice. I couldn't, basically everything hurt. My hands hurt, my elbows hurt, my shoulders were hurting, but especially my wrists. My wrists were really hurting. And I did have strength in my entire body, having worked out for a number of years then, and also having done jiu-jitsu from an early age on. But despite this, here was the thing. It was a contradiction for them. So the doctors were like, oh, yeah, we can feel it's hot and we can see it's inflamed, but still you've got strength. So, you just need to work. That's the way it was back in the day in the Netherlands. And so, I got the opportunity to stay at home for a couple of months. But like I said, I felt all alone back then. So the good thing was, we got this little bird, a bluebird, and his name was Jerry, and he went with me everywhere I went. So they cut his wings basically at first, and when he was on my shoulder, I just made sure that he couldn't fly out of a window or an open door or anything at all. So if I were doing laundry, he would still be on my shoulder, and one of the things I would do was I would actually go play the piano, because that's one thing I knew, and the piano, that was from my parents' home, and that was familiar to me. And then there was playing games on the computer, and I don't think we had much more than solitaire back then. So of course clicking with the mouse, and then right hurt, so then I would do it with left, and then left hurt, so I would do it with right. So this started actually by me sitting like this, because back in the days we didn't know anything about how to have a responsible way of sitting behind the desk. And so when I first went to my GP, my family doctor, he said, well, you need to take it a little bit easy when it comes to your right hand. So I started doing everything with left, and then I had two hands, which didn't function anymore. And like I said, I was at home. They'd made me 2 braces. Basically, all I could do was this. And that was about it. I was living in a sleeping city. There was nothing to do besides maybe walking to the river, and that was about it. And, that's why they call it a sleeping city, because people only live there because it's easy for them to travel like 30 minutes and then be at their place of work. But there was nothing much to do, and basically everything was hard for me to do. So there I was, and at some point they said, you know what, you need to come back to work. And so they had me driving, which was about an hour to get to the place where I was working. And they basically sent me back there because when I sustained my injuries, it was there. And I was creating a manual back then, typing it. And again, we didn't know about how to sit in a good way, which relaxes the shoulder, supports the arm, supports the wrists and all that stuff. It was unknown back then. So I went back. So that meant driving with my braces on. Then when I got there, they were changed for other braces because the braces made out of cast, I couldn't use them in the car. So I got other braces for when I was driving, and then I would get there. And yes, I could pick up the phone and I could type a little something, and if it really hurt, then I would write it down, and someone else would help me with the typing. And then by the time it was lunchtime, I needed people to help me put things on the tray, cut my meat open, my carton of milk, all that stuff. I couldn't do that on my own. And then I would go back home, and back home I still couldn't do much. So no wonder that within a year we broke up and I went back to my parents again. I met a new physical therapist over there, and he actually said something which really helped me out, which was, you know what, you need to go play drums, which was something I really wanted to do. Well, that's something for a different story. But we did work on going to the gym again, which was one of the things I had been doing back in those days. But all in all, it took me a lot of projects, a lot of jobs. We called them projects back in the day, before I finally could really use my hands again. I think it was over 5-6 years. And it was because I got this training job. I became a trainer. And that's when I didn't have to type anymore. And that's when they finally got the rest that they needed. Of course, there was still the other thing, which was called driving. And being a trainer, I had to go through the entire country and getting new students like every 2 days, somewhere between 12 and 14 people. I pretty much got a burnout pretty quickly. I mean, I love the job because I love talking to people and I love to inspire them. And, I had a lot of things I'd learned over the years. I always say I grew up in the IT, in those big mainframe worlds. And if you're wondering what a mainframe is, well, that's a machine that's the size of this room times 2, 3, 4 times. And nowadays, of course, it's like a little machine. It can basically fit under your table. But back then it was huge. And I mean, for 3 gigabytes, that was an entire room. It took up for 3 gigabytes, and they had these discs, and it was like this big. It doesn't really fit the screen, and this high. And it was pretty cool. I have to say, it was actually pretty cool. And so I loved walking around in those computer centers, and I'd been working at a help desk as a system operator, as a network operator. So basically, if the network would go down, no one was able to collect cash from their accounts. Changes which were made, transfers, they would not get booked. When we're talking interest, back in the day when there was still interest, that would not change. It would not be calculated. So that would be a big problem, Everything would go haywire. People couldn't collect cash money because the ATMs wouldn't work. So there were a lot of things were involved when things wouldn't go the way they should. And, well, you probably know by now that I worked in the financial IT. And I have to say, it was fun, though, especially when half the country couldn't work. That gave a little bit of a thrill. Anyway, so slowly there was some improvement. Things started to go better. By that time, we had this little tool, and this tool made sure that I got plenty of rest. I had a lot of breaks. But that wasn't until I had my first burnout. So here we went again. I went to become a trainer. I didn't have to type anymore. That was good. Then I got my burnout, and then I was back to typing, but with this little program. And before I knew it, I couldn't even read anymore. It was completely over and done with. And that's basically when my healing started to kick in. And why? Because as a trainer, I had to do a lot of personal growth. I had to know what to expect from people. I had to get across a certain way as a trainer. I had to motivate them. I had to be energetic, all that stuff. And, well, going on, when I started working for other businesses, I had been doing stuff on my own for so long that when at first I started working at this big computer company, it was fun, I was like a kid in a playground. I loved it. And, I could basically choose when I would go there and when not, as long as I did my work at home, which was a good thing to do. And then, of course, things changed again, because management changed. And there we were back again in not being believed. And that went on for a lot of years. So the good news is, I didn't have much problems anymore when it came to repetitive strain injury. The good news is that most of my burnout had gone. I did get it back a couple of times, but I still needed to learn to speak up, and especially to speak out. And that was something that has cost me a lot of years to do. And the funny thing was that what I was teaching, which was a basic framework, a structure of how to look at processes within the IT, processes related to things going wrong, changes they had to make, everything related to the infrastructure so people could work, and when things had to change, the people on the systems wouldn't notice it, or they would be warned in advance. Okay, please note, you won't be able to use system X, in a certain time frame. And lots of people didn't want to adopt that framework because they were afraid of change, and they didn't want change. It's funny how that works, because I told people, well, let's get your complaints here, what you're scared of, let's write it all down, and let's brainstorm together how we can make this happen, and what you will gain from this framework. And we can do it without you, so we need your cooperation. So needless to say that at some point I became a communication manager. And still there I was, not able to really speak out. So by the time I had my own struggles, those managers, he wanted to have me kicked from the team, but since other people had hired me, they couldn't. And because basically, if I would be working for you, I would be working hard. And they knew, the CEOs, they knew what kind of person I was. They had seen me in action as trainer, and that's why they said, okay, we want her for the job. And of course, new people didn't know. They only saw someone who was speaking up somewhat, and they weren't too pleased with it. So, getting back to suffering in silence. What I did likely was suffering in silence most of the time, especially the time when I had the repetitive strain injury and I was living far away from my family. That was a really rough time for me. And like I said, I was lucky. I had this little bird, Jerry, and he actually could talk. And that was fun. So I always was in sort of company, a little bit of company. And he would actually the cage would always be open. And at some point, when I was finally living on my own again, and I couldn't fall asleep, he would actually come out of the cage, and he would land on my shoulder, and then he would say, good night, and sleep, sweet dreams, something along those lines. And basically he was saying, okay, get out of this room, make sure that the lights are turned off, and go find your bed so I can sleep. It was kind of funny. He was a sweetheart. So, suffering in silence. A lot of people do this. And when you're a business owner, chances are that you are doing so too. And what do I mean by that? A lot of business owners feel like they are the one responsible for the company, and only they can do what they are doing. So they are doing a certain kind of magic. And that one thing that made the business grow is something they have a hard time teaching to the staff. So I'm not talking about picking up the phone, answering certain calls, and fixing problems, but I am talking about thinking about revenue, how to get new customers, all those kind of things. Not just selling something, but selling something with a profit. And when you feel that you have to do all those things yourself, and that people aren't listening to you, well, that makes it a little bit harder. But especially when you feel like you need to be the big boss out there, so you can't actually share anything with your staff, that's way harder. And by the way, one can lead to the other. So if you're not sharing anything, then why would people listen to you? It's not that hard to understand. So, going back to what I probably could have done and should have done was I should have talked to other people about this. So there was a strategy session with the CEO of the company and with some other people. But I was still so blue by that during that time. I didn't know what was expected from me. So I don't believe that I brought anything worthwhile to the table, because I just didn't know what they expected from me, and no one basically told me. So I wasn't taught what to do. Well, the other part was, of course, that they didn't know what was going on. So they basically say, take it easy. In my head, I would translate that to, oh, stop whining, just go on, And of course, that made it all worse, because you can't go on when something is inflamed. It will only get worse. And by the way, the same applies for when you have burnout. Doesn't work very well either. So my first thing I would say to you is, whatever you do, stop thinking it's you. Stop thinking what they might tell you, that it's all in your mind. And don't believe that you and whatever you're suffering from isn't important. And the latter is very important, because in this system, in the healthcare system, and of course I realize it's different wherever you go, but in the healthcare system, you usually have to go back a few times unless you are paying really good money to get things sorted out. And in my case, of course, I had on a personal level my own doctor, and then there was one who told me what to do, which was assigned by the company, because and totally different things they wanted to achieve. One was like, okay, we want you to be the best you can be. We want you to feel the best. We want you to be feeling, 100% physically fit. And the other one was, oh, you need to make money as quickly as possible. So, completely different story. And because I still had my strengths, they didn't believe me. So, and just try and explain it to people that I couldn't open a bottle, but I still had strengths to shake someone's hand. It just straight after, it would hurt. And of course, I had learned never to complain. That was the way I had been raised. So I guess that they didn't know any better because I just didn't say it. So what I would advise you to do, if you ever get into this situation, first of all, you need to become specific about what's going on with you. Get clear about what you know. Get clarity in your mind. And sometimes we do this simple by, and this might sound funny, but by playing the game. Because that way, the chatterbox, which is the conscious mind, stops chattering, and the subconscious mind can come to the surface with everything that's going on. So actually, what you're thinking and you're trying to hide, that will come to the surface, and it helps you to write things down. So get clarity, write things down, maybe work out, but do something that basically relaxes you. Next, share your story. And like I said, I didn't have anyone to share it with back in the day. And at some point, people were used to me were used to seeing me wearing braces. It was normal. Oh yeah, that's her. Oh, what's going on? Yeah, I hurt my wrist, repetitive strain injury. Okay. So what are you doing about it? Yeah, they got me a different monitor and they got me different keyboards and yeah. So it still didn't help much because no one else around me, except for the CEO, was suffering from repetitive strain injury. At least not the ones I knew. So getting support was hard. But nowadays, a lot of things are known. So whatever you do, talk to people about it. Try new things. Well, I did try new things. And I think I shared this before, but I would go to the gym and they would have these leather straps and they would tie these around my wrists so I could use my arms and not put any strain on my wrists. And I could actually do the exercises. But of course, I needed someone to help me to get in and out of those straps. Tie me to the machines. It sounds so wrong as if I say it like that, but it was working. And I didn't mind, it helped me out. And, at some point, because I loved going to the gym, because it's one of the few things I could actually do, because I hadn't been able to go to gymnastics ever since I was like 13 or 14 years old. So finally being able to do something without the jumping and without the running was actually kind of cool. Until, of course, my wrist and my hand started hurting. So we tried to get it back again, do normal things. I also got taught how to play drums, starting with like 5 minutes a day. And so I got new jobs, which of course helped. I no longer was typing behind the computer all the time. I was becoming a trainer. And so all these different things helped me discover what worked for me and what didn't work for me. And it also helped me to improve certain things and certain skills. Well, the next thing is investigate, explore, and ask. So I remember that they actually gave me this big file. Here you go. Read about it. Oh, you know about it? And they took it back. That was a shame, because I was inclined to say, yes, I know, because when I knew a little thing, then yeah, of course I do. I was always eager to know things. But I wasn't, because one of the few things I could actually do, because I hadn't been able to go to gymnastics ever since I was like 13 or 14 years old. So finally being able to do something without the jumping and without the strain on my wrists and I could actually do the exercises, but of course I needed someone to help me to get in and out of those straps. So I wasn't that kind of person that would say, oh, hang on, can you give it back to me so I can read it? Can you make some copies? Now I would do it, but back then I didn't. You know, I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know how to speak up. I didn't know how to, get there for myself and get people to understand what I need, because I didn't say it, basically. That was the whole thing. So nowadays, I would say to people, go to Google, go to YouTube, ask other people. We basically have a worldwide catalog nowadays. Of course, back in the day we did too, but try to get access to that worldwide catalog. That was a little bit harder, but nowadays, especially with all the machines which are doing the translating, it's so much easier to get to information. Well, speak up and speak out to the experts, and that's a different ball game. So, like I told you, I had this GP, this family doctor, and the first one always said, must be something psychological. The second one I had was like, yeah, just take it easy, and which resulted that I had a problem, with both wrists, both hands, both arms. And it wasn't until I actually became a medical fitness instructor that I figured out what I needed to do. And why did I become a medical fitness instructor? Because I loved working out. And at some point I discovered that I could do aerobics as long as I didn't run, but just walk, and I didn't jump, but just do my exercises on the floor. And so when there was this new chain of gyms, I was like, okay, so what do you do when it comes to aerobics and steps and all that stuff? Because I always need to do it a little bit different. So they heard me talk, and then I said, you know what you need to do? You need to follow a training. You need to do the fitness trainer A. Back then. So I went to do it. Went back to that place that I basically escaped once a week. And then I got to understand a little thing or two about my joints and about my ligaments and why things weren't working the way they should. And I thought that was so very interesting that I decided, okay, I need to know more about this. So I decided to do the medical fitness training, which I did. And one thing led to another, and then I decided to become a sports masseuse, and then a coach, and next a therapist. Oh no, first a therapist, and then a coach, and then a counselor. And well, now I'm ending up sharing my stories here. And but what it taught me was certain expertise, and because of that expertise, I started to understand what was going on, and that's what I needed, so I could explain to people, like, this is what I'm experiencing. So for the first time, I had medical terms. I could explain what kind of feeling I had. So I learned there's something like dull pain, and there's sharp pain, and there's the way we are supposed to stretch as opposed to what I was doing, different angles, all that stuff. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I could actually make known what was going on. And because of that, people started to figure out what was going on with me. And it wasn't about the mind. Yes, of course, I didn't know how to stop. And basically by saying it was something mental, so mentally going on with me. In case you are wondering what's going on, there's a mosquito here. And I would like to kill it, like right now, because when I get mosquito bites, they are like cigarette burns, like right here that looks like a cigarette burn. Well, it's not. It's a mosquito bite. So I thought I'd caught it, but I didn't. But I will get it. No worries. But if I'm a bit distracted, then you know why. So by talking their language, understanding what was going on, that made so much of a difference. And well, like I said, then they discovered that I was hypermobile. And as a result, things work a little bit different on my end. So whenever I feel like it's not going the way it should, that's when I need to take a break and not push on like I was taught to do. Basically, when I was a young kid, doing jiu-jitsu, I fell flat on my face, I broke my nose, and, the teacher was like, okay, put some cold water on it and now go on. That was the end of the story. I never went to the hospital even to get it checked. So, when you learn to finally say what's going on and to go back because things are not working, that's when a new world opens up for you, and that's when you get to feel empowered. And I can't tell you how good it feels once you stand up for yourself. And even then, it's not easy. It's taken me decades to get to where I am right now. And then even now, just recently I had COVID. I'd been able to dodge it like for 2 years. And then everything got opened up. No more distance, no more facial mask, no more testing. And of course, now everyone is getting it. And this included me. And, when I called the nightclub where I'd been, which was purely coincidental because I hadn't, it wasn't my plan to go clubbing. My only plan was to get a bite to eat because I was hungry. And, well, like I said, I ended up with COVID. Symptoms started on my birthday. It was best birthday present ever. But anyway, we were quarantined because that's the only regulation we still have. When you get COVID and you are vaccinated and you've got your booster shot, then you need to stay in quarantine for 5 days until your symptoms are gone, then another 24 hours. And when you're not vaccinated, then 10 days in quarantine. And I don't think that they talk about any symptoms after that. So the good news was no one contracted it, even though I had been talking to other people, because my home test didn't show. But the moment I got stuck at home and I was quarantined, I was like, yeah, I would like ice cream, for my throat. So the first day, one asked, okay, what do you need? Yeah, I'll go get you some ice cream. And then the next day, they were next door, said, okay, do you want something? Here's some food. But most of the time, I had to figure it out on my own. And here's the thing. Suffering in silence, I know it all too well. So the things I'd ordered to be delivered were ordered before I knew I had COVID. And when I knew, certain things could be delivered and certain things couldn't be. But I couldn't get it myself. And knowing that certain people would, like, oh my God, there she is again. This is what she wants. I was like, okay, never mind. I'm not even going to ask them. And so the minute I felt up for it and I felt like, oh, hey, my symptoms are gone. I don't sneeze anymore. I'm not coughing anymore. I was like, oh, that's good. Let's get that facial mask. So I asked the GP, the family doctor, what do I need to do? And they said, well, if you're not entirely certain, then you just need to wear your facial mask. And out I went, of course, disinfectant, all that stuff. I didn't want to get that anyone would get infected because of me. Then again, I had been in contact with people the first 2 days because I didn't know until someone said, well, maybe you should get a PCR test as well. And that's when I got the PCR test, when I found out that I actually had COVID. But yes, even when you know how to stand up for yourself, how to speak up and speak out, it's never that easy. So for me, it really depends on what it is that I can or cannot do, whether I will speak up or not. So it gets easier, every day. I've got allergies, so when I go to a restaurant, most of them know me, and when they don't, I'll introduce myself and I'll say, okay, I've got a number of allergies, so can I talk to the chief? He's making the food, all that, or not the chief, the chef who's making all the food. And when it comes to needing to sit down because of pain, then I'll do that too. And that's mostly because I know that, especially having had all these problems with my ankle for so long, as in 7 years, I know that the only way that it got healed was not just because of the 2 surgeries, but also because I knew when to elevate my foot and to stop doing things. But of course, one comes with the expense for the other one. Oh, see, there was the mosquito. Went to have a ball for a short amount of time. And so, last but not least, you will grow stronger each time you speak up and you speak out. So, after having experienced all this stuff, first with my wrist, later with my back, and you can name it, and I've had it when it comes to joints and ligaments, and because that's part of the result of being hypermobile, and in my case having either EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which means that the ligaments in my body are not functioning the way they should, and of course that also has effect on my internal organs as well. I've learned to ask for a second opinion. I've learned to document everything. So not too long ago, I had these problems with food, allergic reaction, and paramedics came. They took me to the hospital, but I couldn't swallow, and it was not like I was choking anymore, but I still couldn't swallow. But the thing was that they couldn't see it because the blockage or the obstruction, the part that was swollen, was a little lower than they could see through the mouth. So they should have done a different check with a tube, but they didn't. Of course, they did the next day, but that was a little late, But yeah, now I know that if something is going on, that I might check it out for a little while, and then when I'm thinking, this is really not going anywhere, then I will ask for help. So when I pulled over the car, I knew I had a problem. I needed to get it out of my system. I did. As a result, I couldn't drive. And then one day said, okay, so what's going on with your car? And I said, well, it's not the car, it's me. I can't drive. Because I'm afraid I might pass out, choke, whatever it is. That's, of course, when they had paramedics come and they gave me some medication to help me out. It is the perfect example of like, okay, let's wait for a second. What do I feel? So I'm pretty good nowadays at recognizing whether something is really urgent, like something is really wrong, or that something is not good, but it can heal by itself. And maybe I need to do a thing or two, but that's about it. And I guess if there's something I want to say to you and share with you, it is don't suffer in silence on your own. You don't need to. You can talk to other people. You can get support. Just talk to other people about what it is you are experiencing, and someone will come and say, hey, I recognize this. I know what might be going on with you. You might want to tell the doctor this, that, or the other. And you will see that things will start happening. And like I said, this is a time We are in the age of information. We can get so much information from all over the world. And someone knows something. Someone out there knows something. And, you know, if you just investigate and talk about it, people will come up with anything and possible answers. But if you keep it in, then no one will know. So don't suffer in silence anymore, but instead speak up and speak out. Reach out to other people. And if you don't know how, then I will share a link, which is linked to Start to Speak Out Now. And there's a course in there which will help you do it. And if you do so, and you send me a little message, I'll make sure that you got a little something extra talking about today as well. Well, if you want to come on the show, you are always welcome as a guest. Normally Michael would be here. Michael isn't here today because he had a family emergency. So that's why I did it on my own. But normally Vocalize So You Rise is with me and Michael, which of course is a lot more fun. On Wednesday, I'll be talking with Cheeky Joe, and we're talking about just speaking out. So you can find me there on Wednesday. And until that time, keep watching the videos, both on Instagram and on YouTube, Lady Lexi's Live on the Road.